Let me ask you something straight up. When life punches you in the mouth, what do? Do you flinch? Do you shrink back? Or do you rise? Because in life, you have two choices. You can be a worrier, stuck in fear, overthinking every possible worst case scenario, paralyzed by the unknown. Or you can be a warrior, someone who feels the fear but steps forward anyway, someone who chooses action over anxiety, faith over fear, and mission over misery. Worry is not just a thought. It's a muscle you keep training every time you let it win. Every time you say, what if I fail? You're rehearsing defeat. You're programming your brain to stay in survival, not creation. Warriors don't rehearse defeat. They visualize victory. And let's be clear, worry is not preparation. It's procrastination in disguise. You think you're being responsible, thinking through every outcome, but what you're really doing is avoiding the thing that requires courage, making a decision and moving forward. Overthinking is a mental addiction, and like any addiction, it costs you. It costs you peace. It costs you time. It costs you growth. But here's the great news. You can retrain your mind to stop feeding that worry. Because worry is fed by focus. And what you focus on, you feel. You focus on what could go wrong, you feel fear. You focus on the mission, the solution, the next step, and suddenly you feel power. That shift in focus, that's everything. You see, your emotions are not random. They're not accidents. They are patterns. And patterns can be broken or built. The warrior breaks the patterns that weaken them and builds new ones that strengthen them. That starts with your state, your physiology. You can't worry when you're moving your body like a champion, breathing deep like a peak performer, standing tall like someone who's already won. Most people think confidence is a result. It's not, it's a decision. Warriors don't wait to feel ready. They create readiness by how they move, what they say to themselves, how they breathe, what they choose to believe. Fear is not your enemy, it's your compass. Fear says, this matters, step up. The warrior hears fear and freezes. The warrior hears fear and focuses. And when you live with a warrior mindset, you don't just handle life, you lead it. You don't avoid storms, you walk through them. You train yourself to respond, not react. That's why daily habits matter. Rituals, repetition, conditioning. The same way a warrior trains in the gym, you train your mind. Gratitude in the morning, clarity before action, silence before decision, movement before mindset. These aren't just nice ideas. These are tools of war against the mental noise that keeps most people stuck. You don't get what you want in life, you get what you tolerate. And when you tolerate worry, you invite weakness. But when you raise your standard to operate like a warrior, something changes. You begin to attract opportunities. You begin to move differently, speak differently. You stop apologizing for dreaming big. You stop needing validation. You trust your inner fire more than outer approval. The truth is, life is uncertain. Pain is guaranteed. But suffering, that's a choice. You don't eliminate challenges by worrying about them. You overcome them by facing them. So stop negotiating with fear. Stop analyzing your dreams to death. The world doesn't need another worrier. It needs another leader, another fighter, another force of nature who rises when others run. Be that force. Be a warrior, not a worrier. Worry is one of the most subtle forms of self-sabotage. It creeps in quietly, disguised as caution, pretending to protect you. But what it really does is rob you of clarity, decision, and power. The moment you start worrying, you shift from possibility to paralysis. You move from the driver's seat of your life into the back seat of fear, where you're no longer directing your outcomes. You're reacting to imagined disasters. The mind of a warrior is constantly stuck in the future, consumed by what might go wrong, looping endlessly through worst-case scenarios, trying to control things it can't even touch. It's a mental prison disguised as preparation. But contrast that with the mindset of a warrior. A warrior doesn't deny fear. They face it. They don't pretend that life is perfect. They prepare for the battle. The warrior doesn't wait for the perfect moment. They move with intention despite the chaos. The psychological difference between a warrior and a warrior is not the absence of challenges, it's the interpretation of them. A warrior sees problems as stop signs. A warrior sees them as stepping stones. One sees anxiety as a wall, the other sees it as a signal, a sign to rise, to grow, to sharpen. Worry is a habit rooted in uncertainty, while the warrior mindset is a disciplined decision to respond with strength, not shrink in fear. This difference starts with awareness. Most people don't even realize how much of their mental energy is lost to worry. It's like a leaking bucket. You're pouring energy into your goals, your relationships, your life, but that constant drip of what if is draining you. And that energy leak is the reason people feel stuck, tired, burnt out, not because they're doing too much, but because they're thinking in circles. The warrior has conversations with themselves that are destructive. What if I fail? What if I'm not enough? What if they judge me? These questions don't solve anything. They feed doubt. But the warrior changes the question entirely. What must I do now? What can I control? How can I grow from this? Those questions lead to strength, not stress. The power of your psychology lies in your ability to choose your focus. Where focus goes, energy flows. The warrior focuses on what's missing, what could go wrong, what they can't control. That focus creates emotion, and that emotion influences behavior. Suddenly you're not taking action, not because you're lazy, but because your mind is locked in fear. The warrior, on the other hand, focuses on mission, on solutions, on what's possible, not what's probable. That doesn't mean they're reckless. It means they've trained their mind to serve their purpose, not sabotage it. The shift from warrior to warrior is not a one-time decision. It's a daily discipline. Because every day, life is going to throw you uncertainty. You'll wake up and something will be unclear. Someone will disappoint you. A goal will seem further than you thought. And the old pattern, the worrier, will want to take over. But that's when you decide, not today. Today, I choose to respond with power. That decision isn't made in comfort. It's made in tension. Warriors are forged in pressure. That's where you build the muscles of resilience, of grit, of emotional control. You can't read your way into becoming a warrior. You condition yourself through repetition, through the decisions you make when worry shows up and you face it head on instead of retreating. This transformation isn't just about motivation. It's about identity. Who are you becoming in the face of adversity? Because you can't carry a weak identity into a strong life. A warrior tells themselves a story of smallness. They say, I've always been this way. I can't change. It's too risky. But a warrior rewrites that story. They say, I may not know what's coming, but I know who I am. I don't need guarantees. I need direction, discipline, and courage. That story is the foundation of change. Because until you change the story you're telling yourself, you'll keep reliving the same outcomes. Worry thrives on an outdated identity. A warrior evolves. And when you make this mental shift, when you stop being a slave to worry and start living as a warrior, everything changes. You speak differently. You walk into a room differently. You start making choices based on faith instead of fear. And you begin to trust yourself. Because deep down, you realize you were never weak. You were just rehearsing weakness. And now you choose to rehearse strength. You choose to act like the person you were meant to be before the world taught you to doubt. You begin to embody a new way of thinking, not just occasionally, but every single day. That's the essence of being a warrior. Not someone who's never scared, but someone who never lets fear decide their future. There's a war happening in your mind every single day. A war between clarity and confusion, between focus and fear, between momentum and paralysis. And one of the most dangerous weapons that keeps you stuck is overthinking. People don't fail because they lack intelligence or talent. Most people fail because they think too much and act too little. They overanalyze every step, trying to predict the perfect moment, the perfect outcome, the perfect answer. But life doesn't reward perfection. It rewards movement. Overthinking is not a sign of intelligence. It's a symptom of fear dressed up in logic. The mind spins because the heart hesitates. You start asking endless questions like, what if I look stupid? What if I look stupid? What if I get hurt again? And those questions don't bring you closer to action. They pull you deeper into mental quicksand. You get stuck, not because you don't know what to do, but because you refuse to trust yourself. When you live in overthinking, you're trapped in a loop. The brain doesn't know the difference between what's imagined and what's real. So every time you play out a negative scenario in your mind, your nervous system experiences it as if it's happening. Your body tightens, your heart races, your breath shortens. That becomes your state, and from that state, all your decisions are influenced. You hesitate, you delay, you retreat. That's how people miss opportunities, not because they're not capable, but because they're not present. The opportunity was there, but they were too deep in their own mental fog to reach for it. So how do you break that loop? You interrupt the pattern. You condition yourself to take control of the thought before it takes control of you. The first step is awareness. Recognizing the moment when you slip into mental chatter. That voice that says, I'm not ready, or I need more time. That's not logic, that's resistance. And resistance grows stronger the more you entertain it. You must catch it early and disrupt it instantly. The fastest way to interrupt overthinking is with action. Even a small one. Call the person, write the email, speak the truth, take the first step. You don't need to see the whole path, you just need to get out of your head and into motion. Because clarity lives on the other side of action, not before it. Your brain is not designed to make you happy, it's designed to keep you safe. So when you hesitate, when you doubt, your brain sees that as a threat and it activates every fear-based response it knows. That's when you start rationalizing the delay. That's when you talk yourself out of what your heart knows is right. But here's the truth. Safety is not the goal. Growth is. Safety never built a strong life. Risk, uncertainty, and movement. Those are the ingredients that shape leaders, entrepreneurs, visionaries, warriors. You must retrain your nervous system to interpret uncertainty as a signal to rise, not retreat. One of the most powerful tools you can use is asking better questions. Instead of what if I fail, ask what if I succeed. Instead of why is this so hard, ask what is this trying to teach me. Your brain is a search engine. It will find answers to whatever question you feed it. So if you feed it fear-based questions, you'll find fear-based answers. But if you start feeding it empowering questions, it will begin to focus on strength solutions and purpose. That's how you shift the pattern from mental chaos to mental clarity. Interrupting overthinking also requires you to stop glorifying hesitation. The world teaches us to be careful, to wait, to analyze, but that strategy rarely builds anything meaningful. The most powerful breakthroughs in life come when you override the need for certainty and choose courage instead. That's what warriors do. They don't act because they're fearless. They act because they know that fear grows in stillness and shrinks in motion. Every time you choose action over delay, every time you take the step without having all the answers, you're building a new pattern in your brain. A pattern of trust, a pattern of progress, a pattern of strength. There will always be a voice in your head that says, not yet. That's the worrier. That voice is loud, but it's not true. You don't have to listen to it. You can replace it with a louder voice, the voice of the warrior, the one that says, I may not be ready, but I'm willing. And that willingness, that's everything. That's what begins the shift. Not perfection, not guarantees, just the decision to stop waiting for life to give you permission and to start giving yourself the power to move. Because momentum is created, not gifted. And once you begin, you realize the only thing that was ever holding you back was the story in your head. And stories can change the moment you do. Your entire life is shaped by the state you're in, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Most people think life is about managing time, managing resources, managing problems. But what they forget to manage is their state, because your state is the filter through which you see the world. When you're in a low, fearful, reactive state, even the smallest issue feels overwhelming. But when you're in a high, empowered, decisive state, even chaos can feel like a challenge you're ready to conquer. Your state determines your perception, and your perception drives your decisions, and your decisions shape your destiny. Think about it. Two people can face the exact same problem, same situation, same stress, and one of them falls apart while the other rises up and handles it with strength. The difference isn't in their circumstances, it's in their state. One is mentally trained to respond, the other is mentally trapped in reaction. Most people try to fix their life by fixing the external, the money, the relationship, the job. But real power comes from mastering the internal. Because when you master your state, you can walk into any storm and stay grounded. You stop being at the mercy of your emotions and you start using them as fuel. Your emotional state is not random. It's conditioned. It's built by habit, by repetition, by what you do every day, consciously or unconsciously. And your state is made up of three core ingredients: focus, language, and physiology. What you focus on creates emotion. What you say to yourself magnifies it. And how you use your body either anchors you in fear or activates your strength. You can't stay worried if you change how you move, how you breathe, and what you say to yourself. The body is the fastest access point to shift your emotional state. That's why warriors train their body, not just for fitness, but for emotional discipline. They understand that motion changes emotion. Try this. Slouch your shoulders, breathe shallow, look down, and say to yourself, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. What happens? Your body and mind collapse. Now flip it. Stand tall, breathe deep, pull your shoulders back, look up, and say, I've got this. Let's go. Instantly, your energy changes. Your brain starts firing in a different direction. That's not magic. That's physiology. Your nervous system listens to your body more than your thoughts. And when you control the body, you begin to master the mind. This is why worry is such a trap, because when you're worrying, your body is in a closed posture. Your breath is short. Your thoughts spiral. Your body is signaling to your brain that you are under threat, even when you're not. You start living in survival mode. You can't think creatively in that state. You can't dream. You can't decide. You can't lead. You can only react. And that's not where powerful lives are built. That's where they stall. But when you shift your state, even slightly, everything begins to open up. Suddenly you feel capable. Suddenly the thing you were avoiding looks possible. And from that elevated state, you take different actions. You ask better questions. You communicate with more power. You lead with more certainty. That's how you change the trajectory of your day. Not by wishing, not by waiting, but by mastering the state you're in right now. The truth is, you will not always control what happens to you, but you always control how you respond. And your response is a direct reflection of your state. That's why warriors train for the moments when life gets messy. They don't just train when everything's calm. They train to stay calm in the chaos. And that training comes from learning to shift your state at will through breath, through movement, through self-talk, through focus. Some people wake up every morning and immediately put themselves in a reactive state. They check their phone, scroll through bad news, compare themselves to others, and wonder why they feel anxious all day. But the warrior starts the day by setting their state with intention, with breath, with motion, with focus. It's not just a morning routine, it's battle prep. Because life is a battle, and you don't win it by accident. You win it by controlling the one thing no one can ever take from you, your state. When you live in a high state, you make decisions from a place of strength. You communicate with clarity. You act with courage. You don't shrink when fear shows up. You rise. And the beautiful thing is, You don't have to wait for anything to change around you. You have the ability right now, in this moment, to stand up, shift your breath, raise your energy, and decide to be powerful. That's the difference between the worrier and the warrior. The warrior reacts to the world. The warrior creates their world from the inside out. Fear is part of being human. It's not weakness, it's wiring. Your brain was designed to keep you safe, not make you successful. That means it's constantly scanning for threats, predicting danger, imagining the worst. And most people let that system run their entire life. But the truth is, courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is action taken in the presence of fear. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise is not that one has fear and the other doesn't. It's that the warrior moves forward despite it. They've trained themselves to use fear as fuel, not as a stop sign. Every breakthrough you want in life sits on the other side of something you're afraid of. Whether it's the conversation you're avoiding, the risk you're hesitating to take, or the leap you're not sure you're ready for. It all comes down to how you respond to fear. Most people wait. They wait until they feel ready. They wait until the fear goes away. But that's not how it works. The fear doesn't leave first. The action comes first. And through action, fear loses its power. If you want to grow, you have to stop waiting for fear to vanish. You have to move with it. That's what separates the warrior from the worrier. The warrior believes fear is a stoplight. The warrior knows it's a green light with trembling hands. You see, fear never really disappears. It evolves. You overcome one level of fear, and the next level of your life presents a new one. That's why the goal is never to eliminate fear. The goal is to expand your capacity to face it, to carry it, and to still lead, still act, still move forward. Fear can ride with you, but it doesn't get to touch the steering wheel. And that's where so many people go wrong. They let fear decide how far they'll go, how big they'll play, how deeply they'll love, how freely they'll live. But life doesn't reward avoidance. It rewards boldness. Boldness doesn't mean being reckless. It means stepping into the unknown with the intention to grow, knowing that even if you fall, you'll rise with more wisdom, more grit, more strength. The people who built legendary lives are not those who played it safe. They're the ones who felt the fear and moved anyway. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't feel certain. They just refused to let fear make the decisions for them. Every time you take action in the face of fear, you redefine who you are. You send a message to your nervous system that says, I'm in control. Confidence. It builds resilience. You start trusting yourself more. You begin to see that fear is not the enemy. Hesitation is. Inaction is. Doubt is. But the fear itself, that's your compass. It points directly to the areas you need to grow. Where there is fear, there is potential. And the warrior lives by this truth. They lean into the fear, not away from it. And here's the beautiful irony. The very moment you act with courage, fear begins to shrink. Not because the danger's gone, but because you've grown. You've proven to yourself that you're stronger than the lie fear was telling you. You were always stronger. You just needed to take the first step to remember. Courage is a muscle. It's built in the doing, not in the thinking. And like any muscle, if you stop using it, it atrophies. But if you challenge it daily, it becomes your edge. And that edge, that ability to do what others won't, is what changes everything. There will always be moments where fear whispers, you're not enough. You can't handle this. What if you fail? And in those moments, you have a choice, to agree or to rise. The warrior rises, not because they're fearless, but because they refuse to surrender their future to a temporary emotion. Fear passes. Regret doesn't. Regret lingers. It eats at your soul. It haunts you with the question, what could I have become if I hadn't let fear win? You don't want that question. You want the fire that comes from knowing you stepped into the arena, bruised, scared, uncertain, and gave everything. That's where pride lives. That's where fulfillment begins. Not in safety, but in courage. And the truth is, the more you face fear, the more you realize it was never as powerful as it seemed, It was just noise, and you finally chose to stop listening. So if you're scared, good. That means you're about to grow. That means you're about to cross a threshold that most will never reach. Don't let that fear turn into hesitation. Let it become your reason to move. Because warriors aren't fearless. They're just done waiting. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. And that's why the transformation from worrier to warrior is not a one-time event. It's a daily ritual. You don't become mentally strong by thinking strong thoughts once in a while. You become strong by conditioning yourself every single day to respond with discipline, intention, and resilience. Warriors aren't born. They're trained. And the training doesn't happen when it's convenient. It happens when it's hard. It happens when no one is watching. It happens in those early morning hours, in those late night battles with self-doubt, in the quiet moments where you choose what kind of person you're becoming. Mental toughness isn't built in motivation, it's built in repetition. When you wake up and choose to start the day with discipline instead of distraction, when you choose to sit in silence before checking the noise of the world, when you breathe deeply before reacting emotionally, when you push your body to move even when your mind wants to stay still. These small decisions are not just habits, they are declarations. Declarations that say, I run my mind, I run my life, and I'm not available for anything less than my full potential. Worriers wait for life to feel right before they take action. Warriors create the feeling through action. That's why routines matter. That's why structure matters. Because when chaos hits, and it will, it's not your motivation that saves you, it's your discipline. It's the internal wiring that you've developed over time, and this wiring is created through consistency. When you do the hard things regularly, they stop feeling hard. They become your new standard, and standards shape identity. Think about what most people do when stress hits. They run to comfort. They look for escape. They delay decisions. They scroll, snack, shut down, anything to avoid the pressure. But pressure is the birthplace of power. And the only way to handle pressure is to face it head on again and again until your nervous system no longer sees it as a threat, but as a signal to engage. That's why the warrior trains. Not to look good, not to impress, but to stay ready. Because the more you sweat and practice, the less you bleed in battle. And this training doesn't need to be complicated. In fact, it's simple. But simple doesn't mean easy. It means waking up with purpose. It means writing down your goals instead of keeping them vague in your head. It means asking powerful questions every morning. Who do I need to be today? What's one action I must take, no matter how I feel? It means visualizing the win before the day even starts. It means moving your body to change your state, because you know that emotion follows motion, and strength is not something you wait to feel, it's something you ignite. Mental fortitude is a product of ritual, and rituals don't come from motivation, they come from commitment. From deciding this is who I am now, because your identity is shaped by what you do consistently. If you consistently choose to react, hesitate, or avoid, you reinforce the identity of a worrier. But if you consistently choose to breathe, to act, to follow through, even when it's inconvenient, you reinforce the identity of a warrior. You start showing yourself that you can be trusted. And self-trust is the root of confidence. It's not about being perfect. It's about keeping the promises you make to yourself, especially when it would be easier to break them. You can read every book, watch every video, listen to every podcast, but until you build a rhythm of action, your mind will default back to fear. Because without discipline, knowledge becomes noise. The world is full of people who know what to do and still don't do it. What separates the few who rise is not knowledge, it's implementation. It's daily, deliberate, and uncomfortable action. That's how mental muscle is built. That's how fear becomes quiet. That's how the identity of a worrier dies, not through wishing, but through daily death to the old self and resurrection of the warrior within. You must train your nervous system for this, for stress, for uncertainty, for intensity. You must choose to lean in when your old patterns scream run. And the only way to override those patterns is to build new ones, grounded in strength, grounded in movement, grounded in rituals that you don't negotiate with. The warrior doesn't ask, do I feel like it today? The warrior says, this is what I do. This is who I am. That choice, repeated daily, becomes your edge. And that edge is what turns discipline into destiny. There's a brutal truth about life that most people avoid. If you play small to stay safe, you will suffer quietly. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, regret will catch up with you. Because life doesn't reward the fearful. It doesn't bend for the one who waits, who hesitates, who hides behind what ifs. Life opens doors for the bold. It gives its best to those who dare to reach for it, even when their hands are shaking. The warrior sits on the edge of their dream, analyzing every possible outcome, trying to guarantee a perfect result before taking the first step. The warrior steps forward with uncertainty in their heart, but conviction in their soul. They understand that you can't win a war you're not willing to enter. So many people live in a constant state of hesitation, thinking that they're protecting themselves from failure. But the truth is, that hesitation is the failure. It's the silent killer of dreams. Every day that passes without movement is a day you rehearse settling. And eventually, settling becomes who you are. You stop asking for more, you stop trying, you start calling it realistic. But it's not real, it's fear in disguise. The world has convinced you that it's better to be safe than to be powerful, that it's better to avoid the unknown than to risk discomfort. But warriors know the opposite is true. They know that comfort is the enemy of progress, that safety is the slow poison, and that waiting is a habit that leads to a life you never intended to live. The difference between the 1% who rise and the 99% who stay stuck has very little to do with intelligence, background, or resources. It has everything to do with what they're willing to face. The top few have trained their minds to lean into the things that most people avoid. The difficult conversations, the hard decisions, the daily disciplines, the terrifying leaps. They understand that life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing the kind of pain you're willing to endure. The pain of growth or the pain of regret. One transforms you. The other slowly destroys you from the inside out. The warrior chooses the pain of growth, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. They understand that boldness is not a feeling you wait for. It's a muscle you train. Every time you speak up when your voice shakes, every time you take action when fear screams no, every time you bet on yourself, even when there's no guarantee, you grow. And that growth becomes the fuel that drives you forward. It becomes your new standard. Not safety, not survival, but strength, expansion, ownership. And when that becomes your default, everything changes. The bold live differently. The bold say enough is enough. And the bold live different. They don't wait for opportunities, they create them. They don't ask for permission, they give themselves the authority to take up space. They don't shrink to fit in, they rise to stand out. Because they know that a life of meaning doesn't come from fitting the mold, it comes from breaking it, from walking a path others avoid, from being willing to fall and rise again, and again, and again, with blood on your hands and fire in your eyes. There is the final, but here's the key. Boldness doesn't mean recklessness. It means alignment. It means your actions match your deepest values, even if they scare you. It means saying yes to the life you actually want instead of the one that feels familiar. And that requires something most people never build. Inner permission. The permission to go all in. The permission to fail publicly. The permission to take the leap even when no one understands it. The permission to take the leap even when no one understands it. That's what separates the warrior They're done waiting for signs. They become the sign. And yes, the bold are misunderstood, they're criticized, they're doubted, but they move anyway. Not because they don't feel fear, but because they don't take direction from it. They trust the fire inside them more than the noise around them. And in doing so, they begin to build a life that most people will never touch. Not because it was handed to them, but because they refused to back down. So if you want to shift your life, if you want to break out of the patterns that are holding you hostage, stop asking if it's safe. Start asking if it's true, if it's right, if it's aligned with who you're becoming. Stop shrinking for the comfort of others and start expanding for the greatness within you. You don't need a perfect plan. You need a bold heart. You don't need all the answers. You need the courage to take the next step, because life is watching, and it doesn't respond to the one who hides. It responds to the one who dares. And now it's your turn to decide. Will you keep playing small for a life that's slowly slipping away? Or will you rise, risk, and roar forward with fear in your lungs and fire in your chest? Because the future doesn't belong to the worrier. The future belongs to the warrior.